Hello everybody. I told you in my last video to be expecting this video. And so here it is. I told you I had this already in mind to talk about. And so we're going to discuss, I'm not even looking at the right spot. I'm looking at the timer. We're going to go over the emotions that you might end up having when you find out that your baby has Down syndrome. I wanted to make this video because I also want to express what I felt, but I also want everyone to know that they're not alone in their feelings, and that no emotion is wrong. You know, if you feel, I don't know, angry, it's not wrong to feel that way. So I don't want you to feel like, or punish yourself for feeling a certain way at this diagnosis. In fact, rarely ever does anyone have this diagnosis and say, I'm cool with that, because it's not so much a I don't accept a baby with Down syndrome. It's not that. It's a thing of acknowledging that Down syndrome presents learning problems, presents health problems, presents all these problems, and it's not a acceptance issue. It's a, I just want the best for my baby. You can get the best for your child with Down syndrome, but I also believe in acknowledging the fact that Down syndrome does have health issues and mental issues. If we don't acknowledge that, then we're pretty much lying to ourselves. Trying to make ourselves feel better in a situation that isn't that good. So you may experience grief at the news of this. The grief comes from the idea in your head of what you have envisioned for your child. Naturally, when we find out we're pregnant, we envision if we're going to have a boy or a girl. We envision a healthy, full-term baby. We envision our child's life. We envision them hitting and reaching every milestone. We envision what they might be when they grow up. We envision what they're going to look like. We envision what they're going to be like. We have a vision, whether we like it or not. We have a vision of what our child is going to be. And we experience grief because that vision disappears. Yes.
Let's ask.
Sorry about that. Anyways, so we experience grief because that vision has disappeared. That vision no longer exists because our child has Down syndrome. The good thing about this is that even if you have a child that is normal, the vision that you envision in your mind just isn't going to exist. Rarely ever do our children turn out and look like and act like and pursue what we imagined in our minds. It's just not realistic. Ego. This one is more for the men, the fathers, who find out that their child has Down syndrome. Oftentimes a man's ego will be crushed, and he, a A woman's can too, but it's not as likely. But a man's ego gets crushed. He has this idea of his child as well, and his ego is just killed. He doesn't. He might often not want to talk about his child. He won't brag about his child. He won't show off pictures of his child. Oftentimes, he won't want to talk to the mother about Down syndrome and the diagnosis. Oftentimes, he wants to deny that Down syndrome exists, or that, you know, he doesn't want to face it. He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to acknowledge it. This happens a lot in men. Not all men, but a lot. In men versus the woman. A woman is more open to talk about their child's condition, whereas a man will not talk about it. Resentment and depression. You can often end up going into a depressive mode where you are just done with your pregnancy. You're just done. You don't want to face what is to come. If you find out after having the baby, you can end up depressed every time you look at your child, because you see it's a constant reminder, my child has Down syndrome, because you end up seeing it naturally. And that can, again, form a resentment towards the child. You can, like I said before, you can feel anger. Some people tend to get angry at God because they blame God. They tend to say things like, well, if God is the creator and God is in control, then why did he make this? Why did he put this extra chromosome in here? Why did he allow it? Why did he do this? Why did he do that? Blah, blah, blah. To this, all I can say as a Christian woman is that sin plays a part in everything. Satan, in a sense, has a say-so in everything. And to say that God is 100% in control is just not realistic. There's this thing called free will, which is something God gave us. Free will is pretty much we have the ability to think for ourselves, to choose for ourselves. We can pick and choose what we want to do, and God does not make us do this or do that. And as a result, sin can happen. For instance, I have the free will to choose to step outside of my marriage and sleep with someone other than my husband. But I don't. I have that free will to do so, though. And that would be sin. And all sin has consequence. That being said, I do not in any means mean that Down syndrome is a consequence to a sin. But I do believe that Down syndrome was never meant to exist, because it is a disability. And I do not believe that any disability was part of God's natural design. I believe disability, sickness, all these things that hold us down in a sense, come from sin. And that's pretty much what I'm saying. Acceptance and rejection. You can have a hard time accepting the fact that your child has Down syndrome, and it can bring you to reject your child. And and that just happens. And hopelessness. You can end up feeling alone and not feel like everybody's on board with trying to understand the rest of your emotions. So you develop a sense of hopelessness. I did not intend to make this video this long, but I did want to talk about my particular experience. So, at the initial news, I was sad because I didn't know anything about Down syndrome, and I've never been around someone with Down syndrome, and what I did know about Down syndrome was all negative, and I did envision this perfect little boy inside my head. So I was depressed. I tried talking to my husband about it to help me not be so depressed, but my husband doesn't exactly like to talk about it. Not in a sense of he's denying it, but in a sense of he feels there's no need to talk about it. In a sense, I felt angry. I didn't feel angry at God, but I did feel angry that this was even possible, that this condition exists, that this happens. And I felt a moment of rejection. Not so much rejection as in I didn't want my son, but rejection in the sense that I wanted to give him to somebody that knew more about Down syndrome, that was more capable of giving him the life that he deserves.